another episode of the District of Sports podcast, our sports podcast here at the Washington Times. I'm George Gerbo. A reminder that you can find the District of Sports on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Google, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn, and more. Just search District of Sports. A reminder to find us on Twitter at WashTime Sports and find all of our stories at WashingtonTimes.com/sports, where you can find the excellent work of my colleague Matt Paris, who joins me once again, fresh off of Washington's 34-30 win, fresh off a trip to Atlanta. Matt, I know you don't get to spend too much time outside of the stadium, but welcome back, and hope you enjoyed the visit to Georgia.
Yeah, first time there. It was very lovely.
I did. A lot of people, I had some friends that are Washington fans that made the trip, and they've obviously the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, has this opening Oculus Eye thing at the top that's really kind of futuristic, but the lower concession prices is something that owner Arthur Blank has put in there, and that seems to get a lot of good reviews from the fans, and it seems like overall just a really nice facility to be at.
Yeah, as far as billion-dollar stadiums go, this was right up there. It was pretty sick.
Waiting for your trip to SoFi at some point if they go out and play the Chargers and the Rams.
I've already booked my ticket for February for the Super Bowl. So
excellent. We'll get into this win here a little bit. Where we got a lot of bad to talk about, but we'll start with the positive, because there's so much bad in the echo chamber that is football news these days. But for Washington, their second win of the season, they are only a game back now of Dallas, 3-1 in the division. But man, the way they scratch out these wins, it's just it looks tough every single time they do it, and it looked no more tougher than for Taylor Heineke, who I'm without overusing the adjective, the plays he made on the two key touchdowns looked Favrean, as someone who watched, as a Packers fan, watched Brett Favre play for many years. His game-winning touchdown is across the field after having been flushed out of the pocket to the left in so much protection. He finds J.D. McKissick for the game-winning 30-yard touchdown, and a great job by McKissick to make three different guys miss with his speed and dive for the pylon and give Washington the win with under 40 seconds left for the go-ahead touchdown. The one, Matt, that I've watched, I tell you, I've watched the clip like 7 times back, and I still don't understand the laws of physics with it, which is his 17-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin, where he throws this ball and it looks like a punt, and it goes up in the air like a punt, and I just don't know how it goes out of the back of the end zone, and it doesn't even go out of the back of the end zone. It falls like in the middle of the end zone, and I just don't understand how a ball that came off of his hand with that trajectory ends up in McLaurin's hands, and neither did the two Falcons who were covering McLaurin either. It just defied logic to me.
Right? Yeah. No. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, if you watch the wider angle of that clip, you'll see Terry McLaurin actually get so open at the beginning of the play that the defensive back covering him falls down, and McLaurin was wide open, but there was actually pressure on the play, and for him to evade, he evades the first defender, steps up, and then gets dragged down as he throws. But what McLaurin was saying was that anywhere that Heineke moved, he tried to move, shadow his pattern exactly there. So when Heineke drifted outside the pocket a little bit, McLaurin went back to him and was just there as Heineke fired the ball off. So great job by them.
And you've got kind of probably the most fascinating thing about, we'll call so far the Taylor Heineke experience in Washington, dating back to last year's playoff game and division win and everything against Philadelphia, and the playoff game against Tampa is, and now this season after taking over Ryan Fitzpatrick, is you look at these other teams, Matt, and the Giants got a win on Sunday and in overtime, as did the Jets on Sunday, and you think of guys like Zach Wilson of the Jets and Daniel Jones of the Giants, and how these are first and second year quarterbacks that were drafted and highly touted and have a bit of kind of a mantle or something to live up to. And so when it doesn't go well for those teams, and it hasn't for the Giants and Jets now for the last 2 years, then it turns into, oh, how in this day in this day and age in the NFL, oh, how soon do we give up on them? Do we need to trade for somebody? And everything just starts churning. With Taylor Heineke, who is another, unproven guy, he has a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt that, that for this team, for Washington, it was Dwayne Haskins. And they did to Dwayne Haskins what people are saying they should do with guys like Daniel Jones and other young quarterbacks that haven't panned out yet. And Dwayne Haskins, of course, had other issues here in town, but they send him off and he ends up in Pittsburgh. But for Heineke, he kind of gets to play like a rookie without the burden of being the savior of the franchise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's still relatively, I guess, inexperienced, but at the same time, he was a 2015 undrafted free agent, so he hasn't been on a lot of rosters. This is just his, I believe, fifth start, I guess, if we're including the playoffs. But he is. I think with Taylor Heineke, you can see the like his skill set. Why the reasons why he wasn't drafted. He's still kind of slow to release the ball. He doesn't have the strongest arm. You would like him to make better decisions, but the guy is a gamer, and I was really impressed with the way he did improve, like from especially the Buffalo game. He made smarter decisions by just scrambling out of bounds and taking the checkdowns available. It was he played really well, and this team would probably be 0-4 without him. So
yeah, 100%.
It's been a great. He salvaged the season given how much is wrong with the defense so far.
And you mentioned the loss to Buffalo. The losses aren't necessarily bad ones. They lose to Buffalo and to Los Angeles, the Chargers, who are both excellent teams as we've seen play out here a little bit. The problem for Washington, though, is that this schedule gets a little bit harder. New Orleans comes to FedEx Field next week. The Chiefs, and then 2 road games at the Packers and at Denver before they get the bye week, and they're going to need the bye week, Matt, because these injuries have piled up precipitously over the first couple of games of this season, and very specifically yesterday. John Bostic tore his pec muscle. It sounds like, according to your reporting, he's going to be gone for the rest of the season. That also includes Torrey McTyler, who tore his ACL in the game against Atlanta, and then he was, got so much playing time because he was in for Ben St. Juste, who had a concussion. And so it just turns, when it rains, it pours in terms of injuries. And then also the other ones that stand out to me, Logan Thomas, of course, week to week with a hamstring injury. And Brandon Scherf, Pro Bowl guard, has sprained his MCL and is also out for another indefinite period of time. Are there any more updates or things that we could see, guys that are maybe coming back out of it? We know Curtis Samuel was activated for Sunday, but is there any way to kind of get some guys out of this, or any better prognosis than what we've seen with Bostic and McTyre, who are obviously both sounds like they're done for the year?
Yeah, they're done for the year. And for Sheriff and Thomas specifically, they're considered week to week, but it sounds like they've already kind of been ruled out for Sunday's game against the Saints. Ron Rivera said that Sammis Reyes, who was their fourth string tight end, would be active against the Saints. So that's an indication that Thomas won't play. And he said for Sheriff too that it probably wouldn't be, that Schweitzer would get the start. So
yeah,
it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good for either of them in the short term. And so, he said that City Charles would be active as well, and he's been inactive for the first 4 games. So if he's active, then that means Sheriff is out, and it doesn't look like either will be available against the Saints.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Reyes on our last episode at the end of camp, and what a story he was to make this roster, and to make it out of that as an undrafted guy. My question kind of surrounding all that, and I'll couch it with the news yesterday that head trainer Ryan Vermillion is on administrative leave due to a federal investigation, including officials from the Drug Enforcement Administration, that searched both Washington, the WFT facility, and his home last week. And it's notable because Vermillion was trainer for 18 years in Carolina, including when Ron Rivera was down there, and has been here in DC the last 2 years with Rivera. So I say that to put that out there and get it out of the way. But like the thing that comes off to me then is looking at the combination of training and conditioning. And I know that we saw a lot of injuries league wide in week 1 and week 2 of this season. We're at a 17 game, 18 week schedule for the first time in league history. And one less we were at 3 preseason games with the exception of the teams that played in the Hall of Fame game. So it just seems like either guys were like, hey, let's preseason, I don't want to put it on players. I don't want to put it on a training staff, but it just seems to me, Matt, that the added week of a season, and the league has stressed every time that we talked about, oh, let's add another game. Oh, the retort from the Players Association and the players were, player safety and health. And I think they may have kind of a point to that this year, because to me, and I think league wide, most people, observers would agree that there's been just a more significant amount of injuries to people, and whether that's a basis of conditioning or less preseason games or what, I don't know. But it just seems like what's happening to Washington is a little bit more of an indicator of a problem in how this is going to look for the rest of the season when you have less preseason games and more regular season games.
Yeah, Washington was pretty lucky or fortunate last year to not have as many injuries. They didn't have the preseason there, so maybe they were fresher by the time the regular season started. But it is kind of reverting back to normal. The last over the weekend there were 6 injuries in the game, just of players who either couldn't finish the game or suffered serious injuries, and it's like that. That's not necessarily out of the norm, but football is obviously a very dangerous sport, and yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of, last year, obviously pandemic year and everything, but they, relatively speaking, remained pretty much injury free. The biggest one being, toward the end of the season, Alex Smith's injury after he came back mid-season, and was such a sensational and great story to see. But it's a team that's got a little bit of a bumpy road ahead and still hasn't found their consistency yet. And we'll wrap up with WFT on the defense. And I know kind of a lot of people, they are in the bottom 5 or 6 in terms of, across the board in terms of league metrics in defense. And this, as we talked about in our season preview, is there going to be a regression from the defense? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Well, so far we had a little bit. We were not calling for this type of regression, but it's been a precipitous drop here right now for Washington. What are you seeing that is, the pass rush is one thing that I see that could be better. How do you fix that? Or teams just saw how good they were in a game planning for Chase Young and Montez Sweat in that line. You got to sometimes give credit to. We always want to put it on, oh, they're not good enough. Well, it's the National Football League and there's 32 teams and they're all pretty good. People at this level have gotten there for a reason. But what are you seeing that maybe could be some of the issues to why this defense hasn't been as impressive as it was last season?
That you've expected, but the defensive line, they've started to make some progress. The interior has been really strong with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne. Montez Sweat has, I think, 3 sacks this year, so he's been okay. It's really the back end that is the problem. The linebackers, like you mentioned earlier, have just been a disaster. Jamin Davis, their first-round pick, will get more playing time now with Jonathan Bostic done for the year. Maybe he helps solidify that middle, but just the cornerbacks and the safeties have been really a problem for this team. William Jackson, their top free agent signing in the offseason, has been really rough. He's had 4 pass interference penalties. Don't know if he's still the right fit in this defense, given that he came from the Cincinnati Bengals, which heavily rely on man defense, and Washington is more of a zone-based scheme. Bobby McCain, the free agent free safety that they signed, really bit hard on a dig route last week, which freed up Cordell Patterson for a 42-yard touchdown. There's just a lot of examples of them not being on the same page, and Washington has been pretty good against the run, but that's just because teams really haven't needed to do that against them. They've had so much success passing. Why would you run if that's the case? So they really need to stop the run that they can do, or stop the pass rather. They can do that by getting more pressure on the quarterback, but at the same time that the secondary needs to kind of do its job and hold its own end of the fort.
And kind of a little bit of a bonus they get is they get New Orleans to come in, who started out the season, with an electric win over Green Bay, but they've kind of come back to earth here. And the Saints are now at 2-2. So that'll be a good even measuring stick to kind of see where Washington is, and they get that game at FedEx Field. Another area team that kind of had a little bit of a similar issue in terms of injuries and opponents coming up that are going to be tough down the line is the University of Maryland, who big game Friday night, blackout as Iowa came to town, highest ranked opponent that has played at Maryland Stadium since 2007. And that was the last time Maryland has beaten a ranked opponent, and they were not able to do it on Friday. Iowa came in, backed up their ranking 51-14, dismantling of Maryland. And the biggest thing in that game, injury-wise, was wide receiver Dante Demas, the district native, going down. He's arguably, in my eyes, Maryland's most talented, most athletic player. On a punt return, or a kickoff return of all things, kind of got his knee twisted. And Maryland head coach Mike Loxley has announced that Demas's season is done. He'll have surgery on that right knee this week. This is a team that had really good quarterback play in the first couple of games. You wonder how, and we'll kind of see as the Big Ten schedule is going to flesh the rest of this out for Talia Tagovailoa, who, pretty win over West Virginia, ugly, tough win over Illinois in terms of the two Power 5 teams that they beat, and they also beat Howard and Kent State. And you lose real big to Illinois, and it does not get any easier as they travel this week to Columbus to take on Ohio State. But kind of the same, kind of the schedule-wise, like with Washington, where Washington, by virtue of them winning the division last year, they get to play division-winning teams in the NFC, and just the way it lines up, they get the Chiefs, and they've got the Buccaneers, defending Super Bowl champions, down the line. They've got the Packers, who were in the NFC Championship game last year, in the next couple of weeks. For Maryland, their luck of the draw this year on the Big Ten schedule means that as it stands right now, not only they've played one of 5 ranked teams that are on their schedule, but all 5 of these ranked teams are in the top 11. The Big Ten, you're a guy from Big Ten country. Like it's the first time, for me, I don't want to say since I was growing up, but you've got Iowa State at 5, Ohio State's at 7, Penn State's number 4, Michigan's in the top 10. And just in case, for good measure, Michigan State is undefeated and they're at number 11 in the country. Like, it has been a long time for all of the kind of the SEC talk that we hear in college football about how good and dominant they are. The ACC has fallen back, where their best team so far this year is Wake Forest, with no disrespect to the Demon Deacons, but that's just the state of affairs in the ACC. And I'd argue, for maybe in terms of actual scoring and prowess, maybe Pitt could be the second best team in the ACC. But it's just been a really, the Big Ten has kind of taken that mantle with all of these, talented teams across the board, 4 of them in the top 10. And it's going to prove difficult for Maryland, because as I'm looking down the line here, it's going to be really tough in some of these games for them.
Yeah. It kind of feels like, this will be my 5-year anniversary for at the Washington Times in April. And it feels like ever since I've been here that this is every Maryland season.
Yes.
They start out okay, some promise, even some nice wins, Texas last year or 2 years ago, West Virginia this year. And then, have they turned the corner? Oh, no, here's this gauntlet of a schedule, and they are just okay and can't compete with the best teams. And feels like that's really going to be the case this year, because it was pretty ugly against Iowa. And, you just ran through the schedule there. That is a brutal slate.
Yeah, he Tagovailoa, has he presses a bit much. There are times when, and Loxley even said that Saturday or Friday night after the game, that he's just, when he kind of gets behind, and it kind of happened in the Illinois game, like Maryland got behind and he started pressing, but the pressing worked out and he led Maryland on back-to-back drives, one to tie the game and one to eventually win the game on the road, another Friday night game in Illinois. And this kind of the same scenario where, was a good crowd, 45,000 people, which is significant by, and most of them were Maryland fans, so significant by Maryland home game standards. People, you're trying to change the culture. You're trying to get people to buy in to what you're building. And he always talks about the standard and playing to the standard. And they did not, he acknowledged they did not do that Saturday. And they've got a young team that committed 10 penalties on Saturday. That's after committing 9 the week before against Kent State. So if you commit 9 against Kent State and you get out there with a win, you can't really commit 10 against Iowa and expect the result to be the same. But yeah, they have athletes. That's kind of like, as you point out, like this last, decade of Maryland football, went from Ralph Regent to Randy Etzel to DJ Durkin and to now Mike Loxley. You've always had some standout guys in there. DJ Moore is in the league. Stephon Diggs is in the league. Darnell Savage is in the league with Green Bay. They always have athletes. And I guess for Mike Loxley, it's a combination of using the talent and the star power that they have on that roster, which they do have in a couple of guys like Demas, like Rakim Jarrett, Tayon Fleet Davis, the running back. Like they've got some, guys that could play at the next level with some refinement, but it's just a matter of kind of getting a whole team concept to buy in and just be more disciplined. And so far they really haven't done that. And that might prove to hurt them here coming down the line. Let's wrap up with basketball. It's hard to believe that we're already into or near basketball season here, and hockey season as well. We'll mention that the Capitals start their season next week, as hockey is bumped up a little bit, and the hockey schedule, looking way down the line, is a little bit altered this year because, in my opinion, good news, they're going to play in the Winter Olympics in Beijing. The league and the Players Association and the IOC and the IIHF and all the affiliated parties came to a reasonable agreement. Part of me still feels like the rug could get pulled out from under that if Gary Bettman has a bad day in December or something like that. It's like, no, we're not going to send our guys, and they'll just change the schedule. But as it stands for now, the league will take a 2-week break in February for the Olympics. So you're going to see, if you like hockey, get excited, because you're going to see a lot of games in a congested amount of time in the months leading up to and the weeks after the Olympics, the Winter Olympics in February. But let's talk about the Washington Wizards, who also come back here in a couple of weeks. And you've been at camp and seeing how these guys are just starting to get back into their season. And for Bradley Beal, it's got to feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, where he's not waking up and living the same thing over and over again, but he wakes up and it's different people. It's the same thing, but it's different people. The Wizards have once again changed over this roster and made a bunch of deals where you got guys like Montrezl Harrell and Kyle Kuzma, playing with him now after sending out Russell Westbrook to the Lakers. And he's been kind of the bedrock of this team now, which is funny because John Wall was the bedrock of this team for a long, long time. And in the last decade, I can remember a bunch of times where like, oh, maybe they should trade Beal for, what can you get in return for Beal? And it's been rumored to go to pretty much any team in the league that's needed him, whether it was Miami, whether it was Chicago, anywhere in between. And here he is as kind of the foundation that they are building this team around, as opposed to somebody that could be used to bring back other talent. And last season, I said it before the season to some friends last year, you were going to get an exciting Wizards team last year. And this year, you change all that over again. And it, at least for now, and with new coach Wes Unseld Jr., it kind of feels like you're starting all over again, even though the guys that are surrounding him, Matt, kind of have a little bit more experience than he's had in years past.
Yeah, it is a change of pace for Bradley Beal, even in terms of it's not just the players that are new, but having a new coach. He was used to Scott Brooks for 5 years, but I think he kind of appreciates the change of pace. Bradley Beal just wants to win, and this roster allows the Wizards to have a little bit more flexibility, not just on the court. They can be better defenders, and they can switch things up there a little bit better. They have a lot of guys who can play a lot of different positions, but also long term, it allows them to be flexible if they want to make a mid-season trade, if they want to package salaries together and get another piece. It's easier to do that now without Westbrook's salary clogging the cap sheet.
And any word or any thoughts from either Tommy Shepard, Wizards general manager, or Unseld about the health of some of these guys? Two things specifically: the health of some of these guys coming back, like Denny Avdia, who with the leg injury he sustained, and also what they're seeing out of Rui Hachimura, who a lot of people are counting on.
Right. So we'll start with Avdia. He wasn't expected. By the time you're listening to this, the Wizards will probably have played a preseason game, or right before it, they play Tuesday night. But he was not expected to play against the Rockets, but he's expected to make his preseason debut Saturday. He got some 5-on-5 run the other day. Hachimura, though, that's a bigger question because he hasn't been at training camp. He's been excused from the team for a personal reason, and we don't really know what's going on with him. And so, is he going to be back before the start of the season? They really haven't said, and that is a blow for them. But if there is a position that's really crowded on the Wizards roster right now, it is that one. You have Kyle Kuzma, who could start at the forward, Davis Bertans. They drafted Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga, and Denny Avdia is a wing too. So they have some flexibility there, especially at that spot. But yeah, the long they were really high on Hachimura's trajectory, and for him to reach that potential, year 3 is a pretty big year for that type of growth, and so they would love to have him, and hopefully for their sake, he returns here soon.
Last time we saw him for Rui was the Olympics in Tokyo for leading the Japanese team, and out indefinitely with just we don't have much more details than what you've given there, and there hasn't been too much more unearthed about when or where he or when he might rejoin the Wizards, or where, whether it's here, whether it's Japan, or wherever else he might be at this point. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. As always, we remind you to find the District of Sports on all your favorite podcast platforms. Just search Washington Times District of Sports. And Matt, remind the people where they can find your reporting, which continues this week as Washington gets ready to take on New Orleans and the Wizards begin preseason play.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Matthew_Paris, Paras, and find my work on the Washington Times website, which George just plugged. So
WashingtonTimes.com/sports. Yep, all of our good content is there. At Gerbo3 for myself, if you like Maryland football and other assorted grab bag fun things too. Also at Wash Time Sports on Twitter for all of our sports content there. For Matt, I'm George. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.